Hello and welcome. I'm Leigh-Ann Gerrans and you're watching W News, broadcasting live from the Arabiya studios. These are our top stories. Former British Prime Minister Tony Blair has been urged to reveal details of his Gaza talk with Trump. Meanwhile, a deadly school shooting in the US sparks renewed debate over gun laws. And Kyiv suffers its deadliest attack in weeks as Russian strikes kill at least 19 people, including children. Now to our top story. Health officials say Israeli forces killed at least 16 Palestinians and wounded dozens across Gaza today as residents reported intensified bombardment in the suburbs of Gaza City. This comes after former British Prime Minister Tony Blair joined President Trump at the White House to discuss post-war plans for the Palestinian territory. Ed Davey, the leader of the Liberal Democrats, is now calling for the former Prime Minister to give evidence to Parliament about what was discussed. For more on this, I'm joined from Washington, D.C. by Rina Shah, political strategist and on-air analyst. Rina, thank you so much for joining us. First of all, is it a huge surprise that Tony Blair attended the White House for talks on the future of Gaza, given his expertise in this particular region?
Well, certainly Blair's expertise brings credibility, but it also raises a lot of questions. As a former Republican campaign strategist, I see Tony Blair's role in Trump's Gaza talks as a double-edged sword. His experience as a Middle East envoy after 2007 definitely gives Trump's team a seasoned voice on rebuilding Gaza. Axios, the publication, has reported that he's been advising Steve Witkoff for months. But Blair's ties to a think tank linked to that Trump Riviera idea, which was floated about relocating Gazans, that is what has sparked the most skepticism, in me at least. And where I grew up, we value straight talk. So Trump needs to clarify Blair's role here to avoid looking like he's outsourcing policy to foreign elites.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And let's touch on Tony Blair's think tank. Obviously worked on a post-war Gaza plan that included a Trump Riviera, which is being so provocative. Are there concerns that this plan could actually be back on the table now that we know Tony Blair is in the mix?
Well, I've also worked with a number of Republican and independent candidates who know that communities across the globe want results, not just here in America. And they also want talk that is not rooted in dreamlike endeavors. So Trump's meeting with Blair and Jared Kushner, and that's again per Reuters news there, it was focused on food aid and hostages, which is critical as Gaza faces famine. But his earlier Riviera talk, turning Gaza into a resort, essentially, feels really disconnected when kids are starving. And that's, again, per UN reports. So I have to say this. I learned service starts with the vulnerable from a very young age. That's something that's been rooted in me. And I believe, this is my worldview, essentially, that any plan has to prioritize security and aid over flashy projects. And it has to invite, sort of local voices. And I know that sounds a little vague, but you can't just have outsiders like Tony Blair at the table. So I look forward to seeing what this White House will do, because I know that this is a hot topic issue as we approach the 2026 midterms. Voters are demanding, particularly on the Republican side, America First policies. So Blair advising Trump really risks alienating the Republican base if it looks like a foreign ex-prime minister is steering Gaza's future on behalf of America.
As these diplomatic talks take place, Israel is continuing its bombardment of Gaza. And as you just said to me, the humanitarian situation in the country needs to be at the forefront of everyone's mind, because we're hearing daily of deaths due to malnutrition. So, Rina, my question is, right now, do you not think it's too premature for the White House to be talking about the day after, when it just remains unclear to me, to the audience, and to everyone out there what the plan is now, what Israel's military plans actually are?
Well, the Gaza crisis, with over 62,000 deaths since 2023, and that's per Gaza health authorities, it's a humanitarian disaster. We all know it. We're all seeing it in real time. And with Tony Blair's input on aid, as was discussed in the White House meeting, it's urgent. This talk of getting aid to Gazans is urgent because tanks are rolling into Gaza City. But as an analyst, I've seen how politics can stall progress. And Trump's promise to end the war, which was made during his campaign because of the inaction, essentially, of the Biden-Blinken duo of the previous administration, despite that, it's Trump's talk that needs to be backed up by action now, not just talks with Blair and Kushner, but expanded talks with other world leaders. Here in the United States, we have plenty of political activists who are vocal about this, and we really believe in rallying for neighbors in need. When we see that imagery out of Gaza daily, it's hard not to look at these people and feel some kinship for the suffering that they continue to experience. I think Gaza's people deserve the same urgency when we talk about American priorities. If there was a group of people being starved anywhere else in the world, how would we talk about that? But as these talks continue, one thing is key, and that's transparency. And that is what this Trump administration is going to need to bring to the fore in order to avoid backlash.
And Rina, a lot of conversations that I've had on my show with many people, and a lot of analysts have said the US needs to put more pressure on Israel. It's the US who can essentially stop Benjamin Netanyahu against this occupation of Gaza. And it's becoming more and more clear that Western allies are now turning against Israel and are not defending them like they did before. What point does Benjamin Netanyahu need to, get to in the situation in Gaza to actually make Donald Trump stand up and say, enough is enough? We need to come to a conclusion, not just almost give him carte blanche.
I think President Trump himself has been frustrated by the very same things you just discussed there, in that Trump had thought he could broker a deal with Netanyahu because they had a comfortable, cozy relationship for a long time now. And it has driven, certainly, I think, Trump to a frustrated point. To a point of feeling as if he's the losing guy here, that he may be being made a fool of every time Netanyahu comes to Washington, which we're now past the 6-month mark of Trump's presidency, and we've seen Netanyahu make multiple visits. But again, no conclusion, no end. And so I think what you see the Trump administration trying to do right now is deploy a strategy of let's throw everything at the wall. But having secret meetings does nothing for ending what is certainly a prolonged attack by Netanyahu's government on innocent Gazans, all in the name of trying to root out Hamas. It feels rather frustrating to continue to talk about it in this way, because nobody has, and particularly not the Trump administration, put forth a solution that feels as if it would perhaps limit Netanyahu instead of embolden him. So what I mean to say with all this is that we are in a hurry up and wait moment. And it's anyone's guess as to at what point Bibi Netanyahu will stop what he's doing. Again, all in the name of trying to root out Hamas, which brings people to the table, but it is certainly not an end-all, be-all solution.
And also, you just mentioned the midterm elections to me. They're going to be happening in 2026, of course. How much do the American people actually really resonate with what's happening between Israel and Hamas and the suffering of the Gazans? Is this a really important thing that people will go to the ballot box about, or is it something that Americans are not really in tune with?
Americans are very in tune with what is happening in the Middle East because of our involvement, our continued money being deployed to places where we do not live as Americans. Having Israel's back is one thing in the aftermath of the horrific October 7th attacks, but continuing to issue blank checks to governments or to continue to aid them with weaponry, it feels as if we are at a pivot point in American politics because we saw, particularly with Democrats, that the Democrat Party is fractured over the issue of backing Palestinians, for example. You know, really what I think we have seen in our politics right now is a sense that America needs to, and particularly our federal government officials, need to be more transparent with how we spend our dollars. And when they're spent abroad without a sort of end date, that is what drives voters to the ballot box. But this is, again, this issue and what is front of mind on the day of the midterms, and as we approach the midterms, all kind of complicate these matters. And that is just where American politics is right now, where people truly are critical of the federal government. But again, it's all about how we spend abroad. And particularly with this issue, I think it's because we get the suffering, the imagery daily through our smartphones, that it is more front of mind than most people would think here in these United States.
Rina Shah, thank you so much for your analysis and for taking the time to talk to us. Now, a tragic shooting at a Minneapolis Catholic school has left 2 children dead and 17 others injured, with the FBI investigating it as a potential anti-Catholic hate crime. The attacker, a former student, barricaded doors and opened fire during morning mass before taking his own life. Police say all the guns used were purchased legally. The shooting has renewed urgent calls for stronger gun control in Minnesota and also across the US. For more on this, I'm joined by our correspondent, Tony Waterman. Tony, thank you so much for joining us. First of all, can you give us the latest update on the shooting?
Well, we just heard from one of the hospitals where these children and other victims were being treated, and they say that there are still 9 patients receiving treatment. That includes 5 children, 1 in serious condition and 1 in critical condition, saying that it's actually touch and go for that child that is in critical condition right now in terms of survivability. The EMS chief also said that 1 child took a gunshot wound to the back while protecting another child during this attack on Wednesday. One of the doctors saying that what he experienced was something that he never thought he would have to experience in his career. Back at the school, though, and at the home where this suspect was living, investigators are still searching for a motive. The shooter, who police say took her own life, has been identified as 23-year-old Robin Westman. Authorities saying that Westman shared a manifesto on social media before the shooting took place, that Westman had an obsession with guns and with school shootings that had taken place in the past. And police say that Westman recently purchased, as you mentioned, those firearms used in this attack, a rifle, a shotgun, and a pistol, that he bought those legally, using those weapons, police say, to fire through a church window as those students were attending mass, a worship service that was meant to mark the first week of school. And there is now some fresh reporting coming from CNN that Westman may have planned to enter the church, that she had staked out the location in the weeks prior, but because the church doors were locked, that Westman was left outside.
And in the wake of yet another deadly school shooting, what urgent actions are lawmakers in Washington considering to actually prevent a further tragedy like this?
Well, nothing really. I mean, Congress is not in session right now, and there has been no indication that when it returns next week, that lawmakers have any plans of moving on gun safety. Democrats, of course, have called for action to be taken, but it's Republicans who control the House and Senate right now. And ultimately, what is discussed and what is decided, what laws are passed, that is going to be controlled by Republicans. Local officials in Minneapolis, where the shooting took place, have called on the community, have called on the wider U.S. to really mobilize. The mayor, Jacob Frey, saying, don't just say this is about thoughts and prayers right now. These kids were literally praying. There, of course, is this sense of deja vu here in America every single time something like this happens, which is frighteningly frequent. There have been more than 400 school shootings since Columbine shocked the world 25 years ago. And guns, for the last couple of years, guns have been the leading cause of death in children, yet we have not seen repeatedly any push towards maximum or more crucial and critical gun safety laws here in the U.S.
So, Tony, what does the shooting actually reveal about America's failure to protect children in schools and places of worship? As you just said to me, 400 school shootings since Columbine shocked the world. And I think many people remember that as something that was absolutely horrific. Is this shaping national debate at all?
Well, this is an issue that deeply divides Americans because access to guns is something that is enshrined in the U.S. Constitution. And some people believe that any sort of restrictions or any sort of laws on gun safety will undermine a constitutional right. So this has long been an issue that has divided Americans. But what has changed in the last couple of years is sort of the frequency with which we have seen these mass shootings and the epidemic that is now being played out in schools. But it's not just in schools or places of worship, but really straight across the United States, at movie theaters, at shopping malls, at restaurants, in people's homes, out in the streets. I mean, this is something that has swept across the United States. And we have seen sort of this ping-ponging back and forth between whether or not there is going to be stricter regulation or less strict regulation, depending on who's in office. And when Donald Trump was campaigning, he vowed to roll back all Biden-era gun regulation, which really wasn't that much. It really just involved a lot of background checks or some changes to background checks that came in the wake of the Uvalde school massacre when 19 children and 2 teachers were killed a couple of years ago. And Trump has vowed to roll back even those small changes that took place. His administration has also halted $1 billion in federal grants that school districts had been using to try and hire mental health professionals. On his first day in office, he closed the White House Office of Gun Violence Prevention. And we have seen this shift in what sort of is important to this administration when it comes to safety. We have thousands of National Guard troops that have been deployed here in Washington, with the threat of these troops being sent into other cities to combat what the president calls, this widespread violence on the ground in U.S. cities. Yet we have not seen the same type of action taken for children who are in school or children who are now apparently even praying in their churches.
Tony Waterman, thank you so much for joining us today and for all your analysis. Let's take a look at some of the other stories making headlines today. We start in Washington, where crime has dropped sharply under Trump's crackdown. Police reported a 23% fall in violent crime and a similar drop in property crimes over the past 2 weeks. But the sight of troops and armored vehicles on city streets has sparked heavy criticism. Britain, France and Germany have launched a 30-day process to reimpose UN sanctions on Iran over its nuclear program. The escalating tensions come just 2 months after the US and Israel struck the country's nuclear facilities. Now to Argentina, where demonstrators have pelted President Javier Milei with stones during his campaign near the capital, Buenos Aires. The far-right leader whisked from the scene and reportedly sustaining no injuries from the attack. The clash comes amid an alleged corruption scandal involving the president's sister. And finally, Singapore is toughening its anti-vaping laws with bigger fines, longer jail terms, and caning and even deportation for foreigners. The country, which banned vaping in 2018, says the crackdown targets the right of drug-laced vapes. Nvidia, the world's most valuable company, has reported another quarter of strong growth, highlighting robust demand for its AI chips. However, shares dipped amid concerns over the company's business in China. Investors were particularly cautious after Nvidia excluded AI chip revenue from China in its financial guidance, tempering expectations for future sales. Patrick Falk reports.
This was the unveiling of NVIDIA's latest line of graphics processing units earlier this year in Las Vegas.
Here it is, our brand new GeForce RTX 50 series Blackwell architecture. The GPU is just a beast.
Explosive sales of GPUs and AI chips have propelled NVIDIA to become the world's most valuable company with a market capitalization of over $4 trillion. Its latest results show spending on chips remains robust. Sales rose by 56% for the quarter up to the end of July, and the company expects revenue to hit $54 billion for the fiscal third quarter ending in October. Such figures would be the envy of any company, but not so much for the bellwether that's led a staggering boom in artificial intelligence spending over the past 2 years.
I hate even saying, oh, it was disappointing in any way. This is the most amazing growth company we see in technology and in the world today.
The major dampener, uncertainty over sales of AI chips in China. Earlier this year, Washington blocked exports of its H20 chips, specifically designed for the Chinese market and in line with regulation at the time to prevent the most advanced chip technology getting into the hands of Chinese companies. To resume sales, NVIDIA cut a deal with the US government, offering 15% of its revenues. The Trump administration's yet to publish rules codifying the fees. NVIDIA didn't even include AI chip revenue from China in its latest outlook.
China is not part of the mix in the third quarter. It probably was part of at least some consensus. And certainly the second quarter was a bit choppy as well.
Adding to the uncertainty, Beijing is urging local firms against buying NVIDIA chips. That's helped boost its domestic challenger, Cambricon. A 4,000% surge in its revenue in the first half of this year highlights the race to find alternatives to NVIDIA. Still, CEO Jensen Huang says the opportunity ahead is immense, predicting as much as $4 trillion in AI infrastructure spending by the end of the decade. Patrick Falk, Arabiya English.
Children are among the 19 people killed in a massive Russian attack on the Ukrainian capital Kyiv overnight. President Zelensky has accused Russia of choosing ballistics over the negotiation table as the British Prime Minister warned Vladimir Putin is sabotaging hopes for peace. It was the first major strike on Kyiv in weeks as US peace efforts to end the conflict struggle to make any progress. For more on this, I'm joined from London by our correspondent, Ollie Barrett. Ollie, thank you so much for joining us. First of all, what more do we know about the deadly attacks overnight?
Well, Leigh-Ann, as you were saying, 19 people at least are dead, and 4 of those have been confirmed to be children. Dozens more people injured in these attacks, which seem to have targeted, at least struck, several different residential areas in Kiev, but also damaging an EU delegation building, damaging a British council building where we're told a guard was injured but is now in a stable condition, damage to the Azerbaijani embassy. Ukraine also saying today that as part of the attacks that unfolded on its country, one of its warships has been struck by Russia as well. Moscow saying that it did strike and sink, it claims, a Ukrainian warship with, it says, an unmanned speedboat, that taking place at the mouth of the Danube River. So all told, a major series of attacks on Kiev, but also elsewhere in Ukraine. And as you say, Volodymyr Zelensky of Ukraine, furious, as you would expect, at these latest strikes and insisting that it shows that Russia has chosen ballistics instead of the negotiating table.
And Ollie, the Russian ambassador was summoned to the UK Foreign Office after the British Council building, as you just said, was damaged in Kyiv. What more do we know about why this came about? And do we have any insight into what those talks involved?
Yeah, we do, because the UK Foreign Office saying that it summoned Andrei Kelin. We understand that he was meeting with officials rather than a senior ministerial delegation. But the Foreign Office says that it was made clear to the Russian ambassador that such action, quote, will only harden UK and Western resolve to support Ukraine. The Foreign Office going on to say Russia must stop this senseless killing and destruction immediately. We had very strong words, as you would expect, from the UK Foreign Secretary David Lammy as well. Keir Starmer, the UK Prime Minister, said Putin is killing children and civilians and sabotaging hopes of peace. And of course, we had that EU delegation building damaged in these strikes as well. And we heard from the EU Foreign Affairs Chief Kaja Kallas. She describes this as a deliberate choice to escalate and mock peace efforts. So certainly in European capitals, but particularly here in London and in Brussels as well, real anger at what has unfolded overnight in Kiev.
And Ollie, we also heard from the Kremlin a little bit earlier, the spokesperson Dmitry Peskov. He was saying Russia is still interested in negotiations. Anything else from the Kremlin today?
Yeah, the Kremlin have, as you say, been speaking through Dmitry Peskov, insisting that Russia is open to those negotiations. As you say, that leads to great skepticism in European capitals because of what we have seen in Kiev overnight. But Dmitry Peskov described the strikes as successful. He said targets are being destroyed and the special military operation continues, but he did stress that Russia maintains an interest in continuing what he called the negotiation process with the aim of achieving the objectives before us through political and diplomatic means. Well, certainly Volodymyr Zelensky, the Ukrainian president, will point to what has taken place in Kiev overnight and say that there is very little reason to believe Russia when it says it's serious about negotiations. And that's one of the arguments that the UK, for example, has been making to the Trump administration in recent weeks, that there should be real skepticism, the British believe, about Vladimir Putin's commitment to any serious kind of peace negotiations or discussions around a peace settlement for Ukraine. But Moscow insisting today that it is still open to those talks at some point in the future. Of course, no date in the diary as yet.
Ollie Barrett, thank you so much for joining us. Let's continue this conversation now with Ukrainian MP Oleksiy Goncharenko. I don't know if you just heard what my reporter was saying to me a little bit earlier about The UK saying it just doesn't trust Russia. And we saw another night of these deadly Russian attacks, which hit residential areas in Kyiv, not military targets. What consequences should Russia face? Yes, the UK and the EU are angry, but will it make any difference?
Yeah, hello. That was an awful night in Ukraine, especially in the capital, in Kyiv. And many people killed, including children, and one more tragedy. And it shows that Russia really doesn't want any peace. They choose to continue to kill people and innocent people. Absolutely deliberate attack. There is a footage, there is a video of Russian missile strike. So it is a direct hit. This missile wasn't intercepted. It was not some remnants falling. No, it was a direct strike at the residential building by Russian missile. So it is a deliberate campaign of terror which continues. Now, we are thankful to everybody who are now expressing their support to Ukraine, but you're absolutely right that it's not enough. All these, the words are not changing anything here. Russia does not believe in the words. So Russia understands only one language of strength. So the best answer would be seizing of Russian assets, frozen assets in European countries, in United Kingdom. Mostly this money are in European countries, mostly in Belgium, but not only. And I can't understand why for more than 3.5 years, this money are frozen but not seized. If this money would be seized, it's hundreds of billions of euros. That is the money by which we can buy weapons. We can help these people who are suffering every day. This is the big money and serious leverage. But the decision has not been made. And all the words, all the tweets, all the posts in social media, sorry, but they are not equal to $1, which would be seized and sent in support of Ukraine.
And you bring up a good point there about Russian assets, but also Donald Trump has come out and said he's not happy with Vladimir Putin in the past, and he's also threatened sanctions on Russia, but we haven't seen those come in either. Donald Trump has threatened it, but hasn't followed through with it. Is it time to put sanction pressure on Russia? Could this make a difference hitting its economy?
Yes, first of all, I would like to say that finally we see not only words, because from yesterday there are secondary sanctions against India for buying Russian oil. And so this is already a real step from President Trump and from his administration, and I want to welcome it. But I think it should be continued, and it should be not just India, but other countries. Secondary sanctions against countries buying Russian oil, it's a very effective instrument. And that is something which will make Putin to have a real negotiations. So I would like to ask President Trump's administration to continue this way, because like red carpet in Alaska that we saw, it doesn't work with Putin. President Trump sincerely tried, but with Putin it doesn't work. So only pressure, only strength. That's the only language Putin understands.
And Donald Trump's Ukraine envoy has said these attacks threaten the peace President Trump is trying to pursue. So my question to you is Ukraine prepared to give up land to reach a deal quickly to stop this killing from happening and the strikes that we saw in Kyiv overnight?
What we need to clarify, what do we mean when we're saying give up land or give something to Russia and so on. So if we're speaking about juridically recognizing occupied territories to be Russian, that will never happen. Ukraine will never go this direction. This is Ukrainian territories. They are inside Ukrainian internationally recognized borders, which were recognized by Russia too, by the way. So it is impossible. If we're speaking about ending hostilities, freezing of the conflict, when part of Ukrainian territories will be occupied by Russia, and they will be in status of illegally occupied territories, and then Ukraine will try and will work on regaining control over these territories by diplomatic means. That is possible, and that is something Ukraine agree on. We want to end hostilities as soon as possible, but this end of hostilities shouldn't be the end of international law, because international law is clear. This is Ukrainian territories. There is example of this. Baltic states, Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, were occupied by Russia for more than 4 decades. But never ever, no United States, no Western countries recognized these territories, these countries to be Russia. And when Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, these countries regained their independence. And they, for example, United States did not start diplomatic connections with these countries, but to re-establish, because there were these connections before. So this is the example, I think, which we need to follow.
And Hungary has sanctioned Ukraine's commander after strikes on a Russian oil pipeline that they say is vital for energy supply. Why is Ukraine targeting Russian oil refineries? This is something that's been happening and we've been seeing more of in recent weeks.
Because this is effective. Russia is destroying Ukrainian energy infrastructure from the very first day of full-scale invasion. So if we're speaking about moral things, we have all moral right to destroy all Russian energy infrastructure. Russia, from economical point of view, Russia is just a big oil producer, and that's it. So if to destroy these Russian capacities, Russia will suffer very seriously from this. So Ukraine do this, and Ukraine will continue to do this. What other choice do we have? We are ready to end hostilities today. We are ready. From March of this year, Ukraine agreed on unconditional ceasefire. That is Russia, which does not agree. If Russia continues to kill us every day, if Russia continues to destroy everything in Ukraine, then we should reply, and we need to find the places where we can hit. And Russian refineries is one of the best targets.
And do you have faith in Donald Trump that he can bring this war to an end?
If not Donald Trump, then who? We don't have much options. There are 2 people in the world who can really influence Putin. Name of one is Donald Trump. Name of another is Chairman Xi of China. And I don't think we can count on China. So we count on President Trump. We believe that he really wants to make peace. He said during his campaign, I will do it in 24 hours. We understand it's a difficult task, but it is possible if he will really invest his energy and efforts. So we hope he will do this.
Oleksiy Goncharenko, thank you so much for joining me, and please do keep safe as always.
Thank you.
Let's take a look at the top business news now. Metals tycoon Sanjeev Gupta is under investigation in Australia after one of his British firms was liquidated. Regulators have seized his phone as part of the probe. A judge found the company nearly broke, holding just $8,000 against a $5 million monthly wage bill. The manufacturer of the popular weight loss drug Mounjaro has paused shipments to the UK ahead of an upcoming price hike next month. Eli Lilly said the drug is set to go up 170%. The increase comes amid pressure from the White House to hike the price of the drug abroad so it can be made cheaper over in the US. Turning to the sports news now, and tennis stars Taylor Townsend and Jelena Ostapenko got into a heated argument on court after their US Open game ended. Following the altercation, Townsend said Ostapenko told her she had no class and no education. Despite the tension, Townsend won her battle and will be facing Mira Andreeva in the 3rd round, which happens tomorrow. And former US Open champion Daniil Medvedev has been fined over $42,000 for smashing his racket against a chair and also for bad behavior. Medvedev, who was knocked out in the 1st round, flew into a rage after a photographer walked onto the court during his match against France's Benjamin Bonzi. A reminder of our top stories. Former British Prime Minister Tony Blair is being urged to reveal details of his Gaza talks with Trump. Meanwhile, a deadly school shooting in the US sparks a renewed debate over gun laws. And Kyiv suffers its deadliest attack in a week as Russian strikes kill at least 19 people, including children. And that's all from us on W News. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and, of course, follow us on X. The Riz Khan Show will be coming up next. Plus, we'll be back in a couple of hours with W News Extra. Goodbye and thank you.